And we begin this morning in Ukraine, that country marking 1 year since Russian forces invaded, sparking Europe's largest conflict since World War II. On this day in 2022, Russian tanks and military vehicles rolled into Ukraine to begin what President Putin described as a, quote, special military operation. Since then, hundreds of thousands of people are estimated to have died in the fighting that's followed. Despite Russia's slower than expected progress, its forces have been able to capture large swaths of eastern Ukraine, known as the Donbas region, which became the stage for some of the fiercest battles of the war. Across Ukraine, ceremonies are being held to mark the somber milestone. And earlier this morning, a defiant President Volodymyr Zelensky told his people that Ukraine will, quote, defeat all threats.
Це був рік стійкості. Рік.
It was a year of endurance, a year of compassion, a year of bravery, a year of pain, a year of hope, a year of perseverance, a year of unity, a year of invincibility, a fierce year of invincibility. Its main conclusion is that we have survived. We have not been defeated, and we will do everything to win this year.
Well, in just a few moments, we'll hear from NBC News business and data reporter Brian Chung and NBC News military analyst Colonel Jack Jacobs. But before that, let's get to NBC News correspondent Aaron McLaughlin, who joins us from Kyiv with the latest. Aaron?
Hey, Stephen. Well, today is a somber day here in the capital and across Ukraine. Ukrainians are taking a moment to remember the thousands of lives lost in this war. There were a number of ceremonies, not only here at St. Michael's Cathedral in the heart of Kyiv behind me, but also in the city of Bucha and beyond. So many lives have been changed by this war, including the family of Alina Ulyanova. I actually met her in the days prior to the war. She was out at what they had organized, some sort of neighborhood training camp where ordinary Ukrainians were learning first aid, learning how to fire a weapon in preparation for a possible invasion. It was there that I asked Alina if she was afraid for her boys, given all of these dire assessments that were playing out, coming from Washington, D.C., coming from the West, that there was an imminent full-scale invasion. And she responded to me that what matters most is dignity, if you have it or not, when you die. Fast forward a year later, I sat down with her again. So much for her has changed. She lost her job. She lost her home. One of her teenage boys has now gone to live in France. And I asked her the same question. Are you scared? Take a listen to how she answered.
I'm scared for them like every moment and every second. But I learned that life is not evil, like to us. And even most weird and dangerous situations, they can play for good, and you can learn something from them if you survive. And you become stronger.
And on this grim anniversary, so many Ukrainians, whether they be civilians or military, say they're scared, Stephen.
Yeah, Aaron, it's so valuable to stay with certain people and follow them through this process. Meanwhile, we know fighting, of course, continues to rage in eastern Ukraine. What's the situation like there on the ground?
Well, there are contrasting approaches to this war when you look at what the Russians doing and what are doing, and when you look at what the Ukrainians are doing. Military experts say Russia is really playing right now for a war of attrition. According to the British Ministry of Defense, they put out their assessment this morning. They believe that the Russians are trying to buy time. They're not going for large swaths of Ukrainian territory at this point. What they're trying to do is wear the Ukrainian military down in the hopes that that Western support in the long run ultimately fades, knowing that they have more manpower, that they have more natural resources. Ukraine is taking a vastly different approach. They see this as a window of opportunity, given the Western support, given the military support that's coming from the United States. Another round of military support announced this morning in terms of ammunition. They see this as an opportunity. They know they've been able to defeat the Russians in the battle for Kyiv, the battle for Kharkiv, the battle for Kherson, and they really feel confident in their ability, should they get that ammunition, should they get those promised weapons, to be able to push the Russians out of their territory. And I was speaking to a senior advisor to President Zelensky who was telling me that he believes that this could be accomplished within the next year.
All right, Aaron McLaughlin, thanks so much for breaking it down for us. And now let's bring in NBC News military analyst Colonel Jack Jacobs. Colonel Jacobs, thanks so much for being here this morning. Of course, we've spoken to you many times over the past year about the situation in Ukraine. What do you think about the state of the war right now, and how has it changed since this invasion started a year ago?
Well, it looks pretty much like a stalemate right now. This is not the season for making attacks. It's cold, it's muddy on either side of the roads, and the Ukrainians are still waiting for more Western equipment and to be trained on the Western equipment that they're going to get. The Russians are continuing to do what they do best, which is to bombard Ukrainian cities, infrastructure, power plants, and so on. The Ukrainians, meanwhile, are waiting to get Western equipment and to gear up for what they hope will be a decisive offensive sometime in the coming year. But it's going to be difficult for the Ukrainians because the Russians are strongly arrayed on the eastern side of the river. And for any attack, you need at least a 3-to-1 ratio in order to be successful if you're making the attack. And it becomes much more difficult if you're going to have to cross the river. The Russians, for their part, are confident, as we've heard and we've talked about many times, that they can outlast the West. They can outlast Ukraine, and ultimately they'll be able to outlast the conviction of America's allies to continue to support Ukraine, that the West will eventually get tired, will run out of money or decide they don't want to spend that much money, and the Ukrainians will be left to their own devices. So this next year, but particularly the next 6 months, will be decisive.
Ukraine waiting for more help, but Russia could be looking at getting some help, too. There have been concerns over China's potential role in the war, possibly coming to Russia's side. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said that there is intelligence showing that China is considering sending lethal aid, and that they do that, they could be facing some real consequences if they did. So what do you think that would look like?
Well, it's sort of a strange relationship, isn't it? Russia and China, who've been at odds for a long, long time, but one supposes that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. But China has been warned by us and by others that if they do that, they are going to face consequences, and they're most likely to be economic consequences. Now, the Chinese may think that they might be able to weather this, but it's not going to be to their particular advantage to assist the Russians. And the principal reason for that is that the Chinese are very much dependent upon economic relationships with the West in order to survive, and the Chinese currently have difficult problems, particularly economic problems internally. So the risk-adjusted return on the Chinese assisting the Russians is not particularly attractive. They lose a lot more by doing that than they gain by doing that. And the likelihood is that they probably will not give extensive aid to the Russians. But it remains to be seen. Xi is in a difficult situation. He may try to do it in order to shore up his internal support, but it's going to be economically extremely difficult for China if it does so.
Of course, yet to be seen if China is making that same calculation. Colonel Jack Jacobs, thanks so much. And when the war started a year ago, there was a strong push, especially for U.S.-based businesses, to cut ties with Russia. Well, a lot of those companies have closed their offices in Russia. A few did stick around. NBC News business and data reporter Brian Chung took a look at the 30 biggest multinational companies and what their involvement is in the country 1 year since that public push to withdraw. He joins us at the big board now for more on what he found. Brian, good morning. Thanks for being here. So exactly how many American headquartered businesses are still in Russia? And are there any surprises on this list?
Yeah, good morning, Stephen. 1 year out from the invasion of Ukraine, we've seen a lot of the large U.S. multinational corporations pull out of the country. We did an analysis of the 30 U.S. stocks that are in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, seen to be the blue chip largest companies in America. And among those 30, 24 of them said they had businesses in Russia and either exited or suspended their businesses there. So among the companies that have said they have temporarily suspended their businesses, you're looking at Apple no longer selling their products there, Coca-Cola no longer selling their products there, Boeing no longer providing parts in the region. Very interesting to also see how this differs from the companies that have said not only are they stopping their businesses, but they're actually leaving the country entirely. Here's some countries or companies that have exited their businesses in Russia, looking at Honeywell, JP Morgan Chase and Goldman Sachs, in many cases due to U.S. sanctions, not only stopping their businesses, but also leaving the country. Nike, McDonald's among the companies that are also saying they're going to unroll and then actually leave the country entirely. Now, there are some companies that have said that they still have some business ties there, although they are actually partially suspending portions of their business as well. Take a look at Amgen, Johnson & Johnson, Merck. These are pharmaceutical and health companies that are saying they're continuing to provide essential medicines to the Russian people. Although you look at the likes of Procter & Gamble, this is a consumer-facing business that said they are continuing to provide some essential types of healthcare, or not healthcare, but rather cleaning and hygiene products to the region as well. Dow Chemical saying they pared back their operations, and Chevron saying they have limited exposure to Russia, but they do have a stake in a Kazakh pipeline that does transact with Russia. So very interesting to see how a lot of these large companies, for the most part, are pulling out and leaving Russia.
Yeah, they are, or seem like they're trying to. Meanwhile, restaurants and shops operating in Russia, they got a lot of attention, especially in the media, when Russian-owned businesses tried to sort of step in and fill that gap when those companies were fleeing. How are those businesses doing?
Yeah, well, I mean, if I just show you some of the companies that have decided to leave the country entirely, I mean, a lot of these companies have actually put a number on how much it cost them to leave. When you take a look at JP Morgan Chase, for example, Jamie Dimon, the CEO there, saying that it's going to cost them it could cost them $1 billion for leaving the country. McDonald's somewhere between $1.2 and $1.4 billion. And then also Honeywell saying that it could cost them $295 million in terms of charges to leave the country. So there's a lot of money that's associated with this. But they said for the reputational risk, it's just simply not worth it, Stephen.
All right, Brian John, thanks for breaking that down for us. All right, now let's get to the latest on the Alec Murdoch double murder trial. Murdoch will take the stand today again to continue to be cross-examined by prosecutors. He took the stand yesterday in his own defense, denying he shot and killed his wife and one of his sons. NBC News correspondent Katie Beck is following the trial and has the latest from Walterboro, South Carolina.
Alec Murdoch's defense team making the risky and rare decision to put their client on the stand. Will it help or hurt their case? The jury now tasked to decide. After nearly 5 weeks of testimony, a stunning surprise.
I am going to testify. I want to testify.
The trial's most anticipated witness takes the stand. Alec Murdoch testifies in his own defense. The first questions aimed at the heart of the case.
Did you take this gun or any gun like it and blow your son's brains out on June 7th or any day or any time?
No, I did not.
Did you take a 300 blackout, such as this, and fire it into your wife Maggie's leg, torso, or any part of her body?
No, I did not.
Quick to confront what is perhaps the prosecution's strongest evidence, the video taken by Paul Murdoch at the dog kennels, placing Alec at the crime scene minutes before the murders. He's told investigators he wasn't there, but admits now he was lying.
Alec, why did you lie?
As my addiction evolved over time, I would get in these situations or circumstances where I would get paranoid.
Murdoch says he didn't trust state law enforcers and regrets the lie that led to many others.
Did you continue lying after that night? Did you not?
But once I lied, I continued to lie. Yes, sir.
Emotional and crying throughout, Murdoch's testimony largely rewrites his timeline on the night of the murders, showering and changing clothes before dinner, and describing the moment he discovered the bodies, again saying he checked for signs of life.
I know I tried to turn him over.
When you say you tried to turn him over, why were you trying to turn him over?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know why I tried to turn him over. Me and my boys laying face down.
Later in testimony, Alec admits a longtime addiction to opioids, that he stole client funds, but denies being overly concerned about getting caught prior to the murders.
What kind of cases did you normally do?
On cross-examination, prosecutors began by pressing Murdoch on the fraud cases, where he admits he stole money from his clients and lied to them. And prosecutors suggesting all the stolen money wasn't going to fund his pill addiction.
You were generating millions of dollars in fees. That was not enough for you. Would you concede that?
If by concede that you mean was I also stealing money that I shouldn't have? Yes, sir, I agree with that. I've said that repeatedly.
Katie Beck reporting there. Murdoch testified for about 6 hours yesterday before court adjourned for the day. The defense team says it has 2 more witnesses to call before they rest their case. And for more on the Murdoch trial, we're joined by NBC News legal analyst Danny Cevallos. Danny, thanks for being here this morning. I wanted to talk to you about this. I did not think he would actually take the stand, but of course he did take the stand. What did you think? Was that the right decision?
Was it the right decision? We don't know yet. We'll find out when the verdict comes back. But there were a lot of problems. You generally don't call your client unless you absolutely have to get something from him you can't get from anywhere else. I'm not sure we heard anything new. He's already denied what he did on video interrogation. We've already seen him give his story on plenty of different videos. So what did we get new from here? I'm not entirely sure. Remember, the defense spent a lot of time pointing at the prosecution and saying they did a lousy job investigating. They got tunnel vision, Stephen, and they focused on our client, and the data was wrong. They had bad geographic data. They had all kinds of bad data. Then Murdoch takes the stand and he says, oh, no, they were right. They essentially got tunnel vision, and there were no other tunnels. So at the end of the day, the defense hasn't put on any evidence to dispute 3 essential facts. Number 1, Murdoch was there at the crime scene. He was the only one police found at the crime scene. Number 2, he handled a firearm. And number 3, he has lied constantly. He didn't just lie about the financial crimes. He lied about what he told law enforcement. And I can already hear the prosecution's closing. If he lied to law enforcement, how do you know he's not lying to you now? Was he lying then, or is he lying to you, ladies and gentlemen of the jury? Yeah. Seems like a long shot.
Yeah, not long after he took the stand, he did make that admission to lying. I was wondering exactly how jurors would feel about that, hurting his credibility. We do have a clip. Let's play that and get your opinion on the other side.
I wasn't thinking clearly. I don't think I was capable of reason. And I lied about being down there. Once I lied, I continued to lie. Yes, sir.
Wow.
You know, oh, what a tangled web we weave.
A tangled web we weave. I couldn't believe he actually said those words, because I was thinking that same thing. Would jurors, how they would try to interpret this? He went on to lie about stealing money and that he had to do that as well. What do you think the defense's strategy is there?
Here's the thing. He completely lied about the timeline. And I have to ask you, this is what I think they should say in closing if you're the state. If he hadn't been caught in this lie by the data, by the other technological information, do you honestly think he would have taken the stand and said, oh, by the way, I know there's no evidence that I lied, but I lied. I was really there. No, he's now telling his version of the truth because he got caught. And that's what prosecutors should focus on. So what? He admits to his financial crimes. We know that he already has committed these financial crimes. He admits to lying to law enforcement. We already know that. Anyone who's been watching this trial saw him lie, but he wasn't discovered until the prosecution had to do extra footwork, get all this data that he surely wasn't aware existed, and now he's getting caught. And the jury can see that, and the prosecution, they've got to hammer that in the closing. All the defense really has at the end of the day in their closing is those guys did a shoddy investigation, but they can't dispute the fact, they can't put on a real third-party defense. In other words, they've suggested that maybe the shooter wasn't tall enough or that there were people who wanted to do his son Paul harm, but they haven't pointed to an empty chair and said, there's some other dude out there, and here's the dude.
Yeah, an alternate explanation. Well, there's more to come. Cross-examination continues today. Danny, thanks so much. All right, now to the late winter blast hitting much of the country from California to Maine. Devastating snow, wind, and ice caused massive power outages, car pileups, and a whole lot of travel delays. Thousands of flights were canceled as people were urged not to travel due to low visibility, high winds, and icy road conditions. Almost 1 million people in the state of Michigan have been left without power due to downed lines. Other states are dealing with the after effects of blizzards. Minnesota seeing 15 inches of snow on the ground. Portland, Oregon recording its second largest snowfall ever. And look at this. In Southern California, a blizzard warning was issued for the first time since 1989, with flurries bringing a rainbow over Hollywood. Angie Lastman joins us now with more on that. Some wild weather out there, Angie.
You took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say exactly that. Wild weather this week, and it continues to be impactful for a lot of people now on the West Coast. We dealt with many of those issues, I should say, from the plains to the Northeast over the past few days. Now we're centering all of our attention over mainly California. Yesterday, Oregon picked up its second snowiest day in records. We're going to see some impacts as far as snow and rain and wind. All of those things are going to be something that folks in California are going to have to deal with through the day today. So let's time it out for you. There's the system that we're watching. It's already started to bring some heavy rain to parts of the Bay Area and points north. As we get through today, Los Angeles, San Diego, Santa Barbara, all those locations are going to see more rainfall, and it will be concerning for flooding conditions. You can see where the best chance of some flash flooding is. Santa Ana, LA, Malibu, Thousand Oaks, Santa Barbara, you're going to be in on this as well. We know that there's issue with the ground saturation when we see ample amounts of rain, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see some flooded roadways. And on top of that, we'll see some difficult travel too when it comes to strong winds and snow. There's the rainfall amounts that you can expect near LA, 2, 3, even upwards of 4 inches in some spots. Isolated amounts could be even higher than that across the area. Snowfall, it's going to be more focused towards those higher elevations, of course. Anywhere from 3 to 6 feet is likely in parts of the Sierras, but there will be a chance for lower elevations, say 2,000 feet, to see some of that accumulating snowfall as well. So that'll be something that we likely haven't seen in a while and we don't often see. So we'll watch for some videos, photos to come out of that. It'll be pretty interesting in places like what you just saw, where the Hollywood Hills sign, where the Hollywood sign is, and then the Hollywood Hills. We do continue to have issues as far as impacts in that area. You can see the high wind warning that's in effect in that area, along with the wind advisory. 30 million people are included in this, and that's because our wind gusts will be 30, 40, even 50 miles per hour with snow. That means blowing snow, and visibility will be an issue for really a lot of folks as we get through the next couple of days, Stephen.
All right, so much going on and so much to look forward to. Angie, thank you.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.